Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to another episode of Let's Geek Out. And today we're going to talk about, obviously, if you had read the title of this video, the Cadillac ATS-V. ATS-V is a pretty cool car. How can it not be? Cars in this realm are very, very interesting and very fun. You know, it's an interesting thing. I wrote about this when we compared the M4 versus the RCF, that these are luxury cars, but they're so good to drive because that's what they intended to do, and they have to do so totally different jobs. But anyway, why is the ATS-V a good entry into this market? And it is a really, really good car, fun car. I like it a lot. I'm not head over heels in love with it, but I'm not head over heels in love with really a lot of the cars in this segment. Because they all have their ups and downs, like everything in life. But anyway, I've got my coffee, I've got my notes, I've got pictures, and we're going to talk about the Cadillac ATS-V. Now, ATS-V comes as a coupe, which you see here, and a sedan, as I so cleverly aligned these photos. What's nice about this is it's just the ATS-V coupe and sedan. You know, it doesn't require all kinds of linguistic gymnastics like when you deal with the BMW M3 and the M4. Why couldn't they just call it an M3 coupe and M3 sedan? Anyway, that's aside. But we're going to talk a lot about this car in relation to the M3 and M4, not because I'm a BMW-ophile or something, but because that's what this car's objective was. It was to be better than the M3 and the M4, and that's a great thing, because if you want to be better than a good thing, you have to be a better thing, and that's kind of the point of the ATS-V. It is, let's start with the design, just because I have these beautiful press photos of the car. The ATS-V is a good looking car, both coupe or sedan. I think it's the most, I thought when the ATS came out, it was, I think, my favorite version of Cadillac's design language, the sort of the art and science look. It's simple, it's subtle, but it's also, you know, it looks gruff, it looks serious. There's something about the design of this car that makes it look serious. This car in this photo, this coupe, has the optional track package and the carbon fiber package. You can see it in the splitter here, which is carbon fiber, this blacked out trim piece here, this vent in the hood here, a bigger wing on the back, which is nice. It's subtle bits and pieces here and there. And the carbon fiber package actually adds a net downforce. Overall, the car does make downforce, although let me check my notes. I have a few on the phone here. Cadillac said that make sure I get it right. But there's a little bit of front lift at high speeds, just to get some stability in the car at high speeds. Anyway, this is the sedan with the track package and the carbon fiber package, and again, this is a really good job of looking aggressive but not gaudy, which is really nice. It's a very subtle looking car. This sedan doesn't have the track package or the carbon fiber package. I keep confusing the two. You can see it's missing the splitter here. You can see the difference there. It's missing the black pieces here, and it's missing the wing. And it looks like, you know, a standard ATS with just, you know, a bigger wheel tire package on it. Not a lot to differentiate it. That's good if you like subtle. That's bad if you don't like subtle. If you want something, you know, bright and garish and everybody to pay attention to you, this is not going to do that. This is a very subtle car. And I like that. I like blending in. I like invisible speed. It's my favorite way to drive. Favorite way to drive because it means less attention on you. And that's for the press photos. There aren't a lot of press photos of this car, unfortunately. So let's look at a trip. So I drove this car. Wow, that's a blurry photo. Ugh. This is from my old iPhone. I drove the ATS-V, I want to say a month ago, out in Austin, Texas. Cadillac flew us out there to drive the car on the road and to drive the car on the Circuit of the Americas, which is a very cool track. It was my first time there, and it was a great way to get an introduction to that track. We found the one curvy road in Austin to drive this car on. The car that I drove on the road, and the car that I spent the most of my time in, was a coupe with the automatic and pretty much all the options, including the track package and the carbon fiber package, and it came away as a very impressive car overall. It had a really nice driving characteristic on the road. It was really easy to get to speed with the car, and really nice to really lean on, to really push onto. There's a lot of cool features and tech inside this car. In fact, we can get started on them. If a lot of this stuff is going to sound familiar to anybody who's read about the new Corvette, because a lot of the technology comes from that car. You have the same 8-speed automatic, you have the same differential, you have the same magnetic ride suspension, you have the same performance traction management, you have the same performance data recorder. All the stuff that started on the GM Halo car, the Corvette is going to find its way throughout the rest of the lineup. You can imagine that a lot of the things you hear about on this car are going to appear on the new Camaro as well, because there's just parts sharing, and it's smart and it's great, especially because these are good parts to share. Nobody does traction control like performance traction management. The diff is fantastic. 8-speed's really good too, especially in this application. And again, it is a good-looking car from the outside. Here are those carbon fiber package vents you can see here. That's legit carbon fiber. Looks neat on the front. Here's the grille. We're going to talk a bit about the front end later, because airflow is a big issue on this car. There's a lot of coolers and air and heat exchangers on the front of this thing. This grille was actually designed to get as much air through the car as possible. They said that there's a difference in thickness between the front and the edge of the entire grille here to help accelerate airflow through it. It, of course, would have been better without the grille, but you have to have a grille in there or else birds will end up in there or something. Wheels and tires, they are, 18 by 9 in the front and 18 by 9.5 in the rear, with a staggered setup, 255/35 front, 275/35 rear. Michelin Pilot Super Sports, very, very good tire. And these ones are specially designed for this car. They have multiple compounds across the tread. Different ones to promote different things, about different characteristics about the car. The part that would get more used during aggressive driving is a grippier compound than the part that gets more used when you're driving on the road. And this is done to help promote life in the tire, to give you traction advantages when you're carving up racetracks, but also let you drive for more than 3,000 miles on a set of sports tires. Pilot Super Sports, in my experience, have been fantastic across the board, and these ones are no exception. Tons of grip, really friendly, traction, really friendly dynamics to the tires, and just, again, lots and lots of grip. Nice thing about these wheels is they have little V's in the spokes, so you can, verify they're real or guess. It's a cute touch. Next, we'll get into the engine, and this is probably the most interesting part. Not the most interesting part. There's a lot of interesting part about this car, but this is a very interesting part. The engine is a 3.6 liter twin turbo V6, all aluminum, dual overhead cam, blah 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 blah, all the modern high-tech engine stuff, DI, blah. It goes on and on and on and on. But what's really interesting about this engine is when you realize it's tall and it's short. And look how short that is. That's looking at the side of the engine. One thing that dawned on me at the launch here, at the ATS-V launch, is that when longitudinally mounted in the car, a V6 is easier to package than a 4-cylinder in terms of length, because it has one less cylinder on each end, on the end. So it's a compact engine in terms of length, but it is tall, as you can see here. It's quite tall. This engine sits pretty much behind the front axle. I guess you could call it a front midship, but I don't know anybody has officially. It's super tight, but it is, again, super tall. Makes good power, 464 horse and 445 pound-feet. Peak horsepower is at 5,800 RPM, peak torque at 3,500 RPM, max redline 6,500 RPM. So you have a stout power band there, and both of those figures are it's 40 horsepower more, 40 pound-feet more than the M3 and the M4, and was done on purpose. This makes good power. It's a quiet engine, though. I mean, it's difficult to get excited about V6s unless they power GTRs, and this one falls in that realm. It's quiet. It makes great power. it's just not an engine that I'm lusting after. It's probably the thing that I'm just not in love with the engine. It's a weird thing to say because it does its job very well. It makes great power. There's like minimal turbo lag, if any. You feel like you always have the power there, and it's a good workhorse. It just doesn't have much soul, I guess you would say, but most turbo engines don't. So here it is from the back. Nice cutaway. You can see all the little details of it. The interesting thing, here's some of the coolers on the top, more of the cutaway. The interesting thing are the turbos here. The exhaust manifold's all integrated right into the heads. So you basically, the turbo just bolts up to the heads. Normally you'd have like an exhaust, not normally because this is becoming the norm, but on the olden days you'd have an exhaust manifold attached to a separate turbo and the head, and then it'd be 3 different pieces. You'd have head and manifold, turbo. Now it's like head and manifold, and then the turbo is bolted right on the side of it. And this is done to make the turbo spool faster, light off the cats faster, reduce parts, costs, blah 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 blah. There's a lot of advantages, and I guess there should be some disadvantages too. But it's just a neat look in terms of packaging. And here it is from the other side. And again, it just bolts right up to the side of the engine, which is pretty cool. The chassis on the car. We talked power. This makes more power and torque than the M3 and the M4. But my gut says, and Cadillac also says, that it's slightly heavier than the M3 and the M4. I'm guessing somewhere between 100 and 200 pounds. And it's an interesting thing. Talking about specifically this panel here. This big shear panel on the bottom of the car. Normal ATSs don't have this. This is one of the things that was done in the transformation to ATS-V. This has a couple different functions. One, it's an aerodynamic function because it sort of kind of makes it a front, kind of covers the entire front underbody of the car, but it also stiffens the chassis and really improves the feel of the car. Now, according to Cadillac, if you take this thing off, you won't see a difference in lap times. You'll notice a difference in feel. And how the steering behavior and how the front end feels. The effect this has isn't an empirical one, it's a subjective one. And that's an interesting thing to look at the size of a piece you bolt on a car just to make it feel better. And that speaks to the qualities that they were going after with this car, is to make it a fun driving car, and it definitely is. The interesting thing they mentioned too, is that when you're in the quest to add that stiffness, you keep adding weight. When you want to keep stiffening the frame, and you get to a point when you start slowing the car down because you keep adding so much stuff to make it stiffer and make it more fun. And that was an interesting thing they talked on about. What else can we talk about here? I guess we could go to the coolers. See this here? They've actually laid one of the radiators down flat on the bottom of the bumper because they ran out of space. There are so many coolers up at the front for oil, for trans, for diff, for everything, for the intercoolers, for the radiator, for the AC compressor, for the AC air conditioning system. There are coolers all over the front of this car. They're out of room. And they all work. I didn't overheat it. I didn't see the temperature go up on this thing. They all work, but it's quite a demand in terms of real estate. One of the questions I asked when I was here was like, why not use the Corvette's LT1? Why not use the Chevy small block that everybody knows and loves? And the explanation was, they wanted this car to have a different character and be more of a technology-focused engine, a technology-focused car, and they didn't feel like the V8 with its push rods and stuff represented that well. And I disagree, but that's personally. The interesting thing is this V6 with the turbos weighs less than that engine would have in this application. But when you add in all the coolers this engine needs, the weight sort of averages out. And one of the things is this engine, I don't think they also could have done it with a... let me pause for a second. I got to take this phone call. Okay, sorry about that. I had to take a phone call. The LT1 in this engine, the weight difference would be pretty negligible between these two if this one, if they had the LT1 and the V6, thinking of all the downstream stuff they would need. But I got the impression they wouldn't be able to fit the dry sump oiling system into this engine bay because of the engine would take up so much room. Take some, you lose some. Anyway, that was kind of one of my big things when driving this car is like, how cool would this be with a V8 behind you? But that's neither here nor there because this car doesn't have it, but the CTS-V will. Steering rack. So steering's here. It's the same steering rack as you get in the BMW 3 Series. It's supplied from ZF. The Cadillac engineers told us that they bought the steering rack, tore it apart, and then compared the parts and pieces with the one from BMW, and they said, this is the exact same thing. The tuning's different, of course, and the steering in this car feels fantastic. It feels really, really good. I can't wait to get this and an M3 and an M4 or an M4 next to each other because I think this one's going to have a handling advantage. I honestly think that. Of course, you can't know for sure until you drive the two back to back. So it's the front end of the chassis. Some of the interesting stuff. All the suspension, system controls. You'll see these kind of guides around the arms of the suspension, the upper arm here, and that's because these promote airflow, right? But suspension deflects and suspension moves. So if you're compressed and your airflow guide is compressed up or it's drooped, it might not be working if it was designed to be working when the suspension's not moving, when it's just sort of level. So these guys are bigger because they want to make sure they work over the entire range of suspension travel, which is pretty cool. I'm sure other people are doing it too, but it's a nice little detail to know that they're thinking about, okay, how do we still get airflow through the brakes when the car is fully compressed and tucked in? That's a nice thing. Also, there's a little cutout in this flat panel here, so you can still get to your oil filter. That's going to help with oil changes, assuming owners are going to do that themselves. Here's that front that cooler laid down flat, like I mentioned. It's just they're getting airflow through it. Interesting thing. That brace, I took a picture of that brace thinking it was if it was an upgrade versus ATS, the standard ATS, and this is on the standard ATS as well. Also notice how big the diameter is on these exhaust pipes. That's a pretty stout exhaust diameter going back from the engine. I don't even think the 240SX has that big of a diameter going back. And then here you see the diff back here. You notice that these guys off here, these are actually transmission oil lines. They cool the diff with trans oil instead of the diff oil. Diff oil is really hard to move around, but the trans oil is not. So they actually route trans oil to the front of the car all the way to the back of the car to keep the diff cool. They did the same thing on the ZL1, and the chief engineer of this car was the chief engineer of the ZL1, was the chief engineer of the Hummer, and it was a trick they actually learned on the Hummer and have applied it ever since, and it works. Which is really cool. It's cool to see those kind of solutions work across all applications. And here you see more of the airflow guides and stuff on the back here. There's a lot of stuff you have to do when dealing with axle hop. Axle hop is real bad. Shocking driveline is real bad. If you're doing like a no lift shift thing and don't have any measures in place to account for that, that's real bad on axles. That's what causes the majority of damage on the rear end is letting the axle take the brunt of that torque when you reintroduce it into the drivetrain. It's real bad. That's where they get a lot of damage. So they do a lot of stuff in this car to account for that. For one, the car has, in the manual, it has no lift shift. So if you get your upshift fast enough, you can basically leave your foot flat on the gas, clutch in, shift, clutch out, never having taken your foot off the gas. And it keeps the engine on boost, it doesn't shock the driveline, and it makes the shifts faster. It makes the whole time it makes that whole window faster, and it helps lap times as a result. Also, it's real fun to do because normally that's abusive stuff, but here you're not abusing the car. They do a lot of stuff downstream from the engine to account for that. Pulling timing, making the diff anticipate it. There's a lot of stuff that happens in that really small window of time to make it okay, but it's cool to know that it is okay. It's also, this car also has the fly car mode that you get on the Z28, so it acknowledges when the car's in the air and lets it land without any issue. A lot of cool stuff like that makes this car work really well. The diff, as I mentioned, is electronically controlled, and it will adjust to help you drive the car better. To me, it's invisible. I'm sure there are people who will drive it who are way better drivers than I am that will tell you exactly when it's working the way it's working. But to myself and to most people who drive this car, they will just feel like the rear end of this car is magical. It feels that way. Versus the M3 and the M4, those cars, let's imagine you're coming out of a corner in second or third gear and you're rolling onto the throttle. Those things like to step out really quickly, which is fun but slow. This car stays hooked because the diff is constantly monitoring, the wheel speed and adjusting slip to look for best acceleration, and it does a very good job of that. And so it helps the car rotate slightly on power out, but it doesn't make you have to fight a drift. Though the car will still drift, and it drifts beautifully because of this stuff. I was doing some skid pad work, and you end up in a couple slides when you're doing the skid pad, and they're real fun. You can carry them around the entire duration of the skid pad. And I told an engineer this, and they said the diff basically goes through like a checklist of stuff really quickly, digital checklist, let's imagine it. And it kind of knows when you're drifting. It looks at a set of criteria and says, oh, your steering's doing this, your throttle's doing this, the tires are doing this. You definitely want to be doing this. So, okay, I'm going to help you do this. And so it'll always adjust split. It'll be constantly adjusting, not split. It'll always be adjusting slip to help you carry the slide. So this car will enable you to drift if you want to drift and if you match all the criteria that the diff is looking for. It's not going to do it accidentally. Lots of stuff would make sure it doesn't do that accidentally, but it acknowledges what you're trying to do and then helps you do it, which is really, really cool. And that, in conjunction with the traction management this car has, is really, really nice. This has performance traction management, which to my butt and to the cars I've driven is probably the best stability control system on the market. I feel the same way about it in the Corvette and all the other cars it's been in. It's a multiple mode system where you have, I think, 5 modes, and 1 is for wet, 2 might be for wet 2, 2 and 3 are for sport, and then 4 and 5 are track focused. Basically what you could do is, if you're comfortable with the car, you hop in, you set it on mode 5, and when it intervenes is when you're past the limit of going faster. So if you're coming around a corner and you're powering out, you might get a little oversteer, and that's fine. But when you get so much oversteer that the car would start slowing down, the system starts pulling engine power, and I think it might do a little bit of brake power as well. But it doesn't feel like it holds you back. It doesn't feel like it's holding you back. What it feels like it's doing is limiting the car from slowing down too much and keeping it right on that threshold. It's so quick, and it works without a delay. It's so quick that it feels totally natural and totally controllable, and it's actually a good driving tool too. In cars like this, car is pretty friendly, pretty accessible, but in cars like the Z06, that learning tool makes the car more accessible because you can really sort of, try things with the throttle, try things that are sort of beyond your comfort zone, knowing that the stability control is there to help you sort it out, and you can learn what you can get away with and what you can't. The downside is you can lean on it too much and start doing lazy throttle inputs because the system will save you. That's kind of the downside. But if you treat it with respect and use it as a learning tool, it's a fantastic learning tool. I think I'm getting off track here. What else did I want to say about the diff? There's a lot of really cool stuff. I guess the philosophy of the one of the things on the diff that I'm just reading notes here I took on my phone is that on cold mornings it stays open to reduce chatter until it warms up, which is really neat. But the overriding philosophy on this car is to make it track ready out of the box. That was something that Cadillac stressed a lot, is that you can go buy this car without any options on it and it would be competent on a racetrack. It wouldn't overheat. The brakes wouldn't fade. It would be able to do the things that's performance that you would expect of a performance car without issue, which is really, really cool. And from my experience driving it on the road and driving it at Circuit of the Americas, it seems to do a very good job of that. Take that within reason. I mean, if you were to drive around the entire track with one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake, you'd fade the brakes and probably damage them. But driven within reason, the car seems to work very well. And the implication there, what they're pointing at but not pointing at, is that, like, okay, for the M3 and M4, you have to get the carbon ceramic brakes, or the Mercedes-Benz, the equivalent C63. Those cars, if you want those to be the fastest version, you have to buy options on top of the car to get them to work for track use. Cadillac says, we want the car to work on track, stock, without options, and it seems to. It seems to work extremely well. They take a lot of pride in doing that. And what makes that difficult is all the things that you have to concentrate on to make it good on track, you now have to concentrate on for making it good on the road, because this is a car you have to drive to work every day in that has to be able to do that and also drive well on track. And this car seems to do a very good job of that. This is one of those cars on the road, if you didn't know what you were in, you wouldn't think it was anything special. You would think it's a comfortable driving luxury car, has good ride quality, has really nice steering feel, good power. It seems to end up it seems to it can go really fast, but you wouldn't expect a lot of it because it's so underdressed, I guess. Not underdressed, so subtle, I guess, unassuming. And then when you start pushing it, you realize, wow, there's a really nicely put together chassis underneath this thing, and this thing has a lot of power, and it'd be a fun thing to push. So in that respect, it's a job well done because it does all those duties so well. Here are the brakes, the Brembo supplied brakes, 14.5-inch rotors on the front with 6-piston calipers, 13.5-inch rotors on the rear with 4-piston calipers. No carbon ceramics because Cadillac says they don't need them. They say these brakes are so stout that you won't need them for track use. Also, the cost of replacing carbon ceramics and the cost of buying carbon ceramics outweigh benefits to Cadillac's eyes. And, they felt great to me. I think a lot of the carbon ceramics talks is just marketing these days, like cross-drilling is. Anyway, so here's Circuit of the Americas. It's a beautiful day on the track. Circuit of the Americas is a fast and intimidating track. Or actually, it's not a fast track. It's a big and intimidating track. 20 turns, which is a lot of turns. But as I found throughout the day, it's got a great rhythm to it. It's got some really fun parts to it. And what I learned quickly is this car is really friendly and this car is really easy to drive. Because after a while I stopped focusing on the car and just started driving the track and started focusing on braking points and hitting apexes and how fast can I enter here and how hard can I challenge the brakes here. And I did that at one point and realized I came in not having learned anything about the car because I wasn't focusing on it. The car was just doing everything that I wanted, which in itself is a compliment. It just makes kind of me a bad car critic because I wasn't critiquing the car. I was just having fun, and I was having a lot of fun. The car also has a performance data recorder, like you get on the like you get on the Corvette, like you'll probably get on the new Camaro, which is really cool. You put an SD card in a slot, you set a start-finish line on the track, you drive the track, and you pull the card out, and you have an MPEG file of your entire lap with data overlays on it. It works very, very well. This stuff is so cool. It's a lot of the stuff that you see like from Video VBox, just at a consumer level. And you can actually, what this gives you too, is you can actually monitor channels off the car. So you can look at throttle input, brake input, engine speed, gear position, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff that you don't get with a GPS data logging system like we use. This stuff off the car just gives you the information. It's awesome stuff. I hope we see more sports cars get this sort of technology because it's so cool to have this stuff at your disposal if you're doing performance driving, if you're doing track days. This is like an invaluable tool to hone your skill and to make you go faster and better. It's also great for YouTube bragging rights. So even if you don't care about your driving skill, but you just want to make a video that looks good on YouTube, this system's great, and it works really well for that. What are we? I'm kind of getting off track here. Here it is. Again, it's a good-looking car at Circuit of the Americas. I spent a lot of time. I drove both the 8-speed and the 6-speed. The 6-speed is a TR6060. It's the same transmission you get in the Camaro SS. The gear ratios are the same too. The 1LE is different. The 1LE gets a different ratio. 6-speed. It's shorter. The final drives in the SS, the Camaro SS and the ATS-V are different. But it's the same TR6060. Nice transmission, feels good. We have one in the 240SX that's similar. We have a similar one in the 240SX. The 8-speed automatic is the 8L90, I think. It's the same as the Z06, same as the Corvette. The ratios are the same. Final drives are different, and it works great. You don't even have to shift it yourself. In fact, I would advise against shifting yourself on the racetrack because it can control the shifts and execute them better than you can, or at least better than I did. I spent all my time with the transmission with the car in race mode and the transmission just doing its shifts by itself, and it's great. It'll give you nice fast upshifts on the straightaways, and then it'll actually downshift for you mid-corner, but it does those shifts quickly and smoothly so it doesn't upset the car. So you always have max power, you're always at the max power part of the power band, and you're always getting the most power to the tires as possible, but without having to think about which gear you're in. It's an excellent transmission for that. I've seen a lot of complaints about like laggy upshifts and laggy downshifts when shifting the transmission manually, and I didn't notice anything that I wouldn't expect. The manual upshifts and downshifts aren't on the par that you would get with a dual clutch, but it's such an insignificant amount of time that I didn't think to criticize it at all. I thought that was totally fine. Yeah, it does have a little bit of the automatic mushiness in normal mode, but it's nothing. I mean, like, it's not a complaint. I think if you're complaining about it, you're getting really nitpicky. I thought it was totally fine, totally acceptable. Should you get the automatic or the manual? They're both great, and get which one you want. We're at this golden age where automatics in a lot of cases are better than manuals, but when they're both good, you can choose which one you like, and there's no downside. Do you want a manual? Get the manual. Do you want the automatic? Get the automatic. Quit, don't associate your identity with one particular transmission. Just get the one you like and enjoy it. That's what people do. We've reached the end of the pictures. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of good manufacturer-supplied photos on this, and I only got what I took with my iPhone, so I don't have a lot of visual stuff to back me up. But I did want to show you guys my biggest complaint about this car was the interior. So these are shots that our photographer Robin Shahano took. He's a Motor Trend photographer, and he came with us on the trip to shoot photos. He did a good job of making this interior look good, but it's kind of a disappointing place to sit for a $70,000, $60,000 car. The Recaro seats are very nice. They are very supportive. They are very comfortable. They look good. I didn't notice any issues. There's a lot of good bolster controls. They've actually illustrated which part of the bolster you're controlling on the display, which is really helpful. But the rest of it's kind of like this gauge cluster is pretty disappointing. It's the exact same as the ATS. But I think the font's different and the color. They've added the red here and whatnot, but it doesn't look befitting to a $60,000 car or $70,000 car, especially if you've been inside a Corvette and see like, hey, it's all digital there and it looks fantastic and works great. I mean, is it cost savings? I mean, what's the thing here? But it's disappointing to look down and see that. Fortunately, you can get a head-up display, and the head-up display is great, so you don't have to look at this too much. And again, it's not like a terrible thing, it's just a disappointment. It's not a like, hey, run away from the car because of this. It's just like, this could have been better sort of thing. Similarly, Q we complained a lot about when it first came out, and it seemed to work better here. It wasn't as frustrating to use. There are still some annoyances with responding to some of these button prompts, like these aren't buttons that you just tap them to increase the volume or turn it down or slide your finger up and down. It just doesn't have the sensitivity you'd come to expect if you've been working with an iPhone or an iPad or any digital device, your Android or whatever, which is kind of annoying. And also this plastic attracts fingerprints like crazy, and so does the screen. So you have to clean it quite a bit. That was kind of my gripe. And you have to expect the performance of this car to be there. The Cadillac engineers basically, I mean, they're all racers on the side. They do track days and stuff on the side. They have race cars. They do this stuff. If there's one thing they know how to do well, it's make a performance car drive well. And they were allowed to do that with this car. This thing drives exceptionally well. When your target is making the best driver's car in this segment you can, I'm pretty sure they did that. But then you sit in this interior and you go like, couldn't have been there something more? Couldn't there have been something more? And again, that's my biggest disappointment on the thing. But let's get back to the pretty exterior pictures, because man, this exterior looks good. And let's see if I went over stuff I missed, stuff I wanted to talk about. Let me check my notes. This is kind of a short episode, I think, because there's no real surprises. It's good stuff that's very similar to the Corvette, stuff that works extremely well, and stuff that I really like. My disappointments are, the interior, and that doesn't have a V8, because V8s are great. But overall, I think it's going to be, when the ATS-V and M3/M4 comparisons happen, I would not be surprised if this car is faster and handles better and sets faster lap times than the M3 and M4. That's what it was designed to do. And so if it doesn't do that, it's got a problem. But ultimately, I think this car is going to satisfy the people who buy it. I think the people who buy this car are really going to enjoy the way it drives. And I think what I really like about the stuff that Cadillac's doing, or GM's doing, is they're making the performance driving stuff accessible. With the traction management, with the data recorder, with making everything track ready out of the box. They also supply owners with a track preparation booklet like they do with the Corvette that explains how to burnish the brakes, how to brake everything in, what fluids to change. Making that stuff accessible is super cool because it introduces people to this wonderful world of car enthusiasm, where you do this stuff, where you drive this stuff, where you enjoy this stuff. When you make it inclusive rather than exclusive like some other automakers, when you make it inclusive, it only makes the situation better, because everybody's having a great time and everybody's being introduced to this world. And I really admire them and respect them for doing that kind of stuff, because they are super passionate about it, and it shows in the cars that they make, in how they drive. And this thing drives super good. Turbos can make up to 18 psi boost. I think I saw 15 psi on the boost gauge most frequently, if you care. What else? That might be all the big points. I've probably missed stuff. I always do. I always feel bad about it. But if I were to give the takeaways about this car, it is a great driving car. I should go over the options. One of my big frustrations with the M3, M4 was its option. The way the options were laid out here, they're pretty simple here. There's a $6,200 option package that gives you carbon fiber, the performance data recorder, a lightweight battery. You can get the brake colors different, the brake calipers different color. Nav is a $2,500 option. Oh no, I'm sorry. There's two ways to get nav. Head-up displays $400. The Recaro seats are $2,300. Yeah, the options are pretty straightforward. It's like, hey, I want nav and I want the track package, and there you go. It isn't as kind of frustrating as parts of the M3, M4 option package is. And I like the simplicity of it. I think the ATS-V is a great car. I think it's a good driving car. I think it's really fun. I think it's great looking. Kind of wish the interior was a little bit more. I wish the interior was let's put it this way. Exterior is beautiful. I wish the interior matched it. It's not to say it's ugly. It's just to say it's slightly underwhelming. And I also wish it had a V8. But it's neither here nor there. But I think that's going to do it. It probably was a shorter one than normal. Suffice to say, I like this car. I enjoy driving it a lot. and I can't wait to see how it does against the M3 and M4. Until next time.